Welcome to Leave No Doubt. I'm excited to be joined by the current Chief Scout at Colchester United, Ross Embleton, former manager and assistant manager at Leyton Orient. You spent some time obviously working different clubs in your career, Ross. So I think probably be a nice idea if, to start us off, you introduce us into sort of your journey in football, coaching career, and how you now find yourself in your current role at Colchester.
Yeah, thanks for having me, first of all. In terms of my coaching career, there wasn't a football career before that. 15, I was released at Leyton Orient as a young player, like everyone. All the ideas and all the ambitions in the world to be a footballer, but in reality, not quite good enough. So I look back upon that as a positive, really, now in terms of my career. Sort of stopped playing quite young. Non-league football weren't for me, so threw everything into coaching. And when I say coaching and throwing everything into it, at the beginning it was working with kids, picking kids up, tying their shoelaces, trying to be as enthusiastic and positive as I could be about kids and football and coaching. Really, that was as simple as it was for quite a few years, really. And then sort of started to realise that there might be a little bit more in it. And when I say that, a few more hours, a few more opportunities, not really anything else in regards to it being a career or somewhere that I was ever going to particularly go with it in a big way. So it was always just about trying to be better, trying to learn from good people. I was very fortunate that my dad was heavily into coaching, so I had sort of good contacts and good people around the environments that he was in, or that he could give me the opportunity to go and get involved with. And because of that enthusiasm and that will to want to get a little bit better and see what other good people are doing, it sort of snowballed from there. I think there's a lot of things when you end up, as you would well know, in football, the phrases of like, it's who you know, and not always about what you know. But I think for myself, it was that a pure enthusiasm that people could probably see. I had energy and I had a good attitude towards what I was doing with kids and people, and then the fact that I was ambitious enough to try and get a little bit better, it helped me along the way. So it was quite a simple process for me at the beginning. Like I say, never really like an end goal of I'm going to be this or I'm going to do that. It was always just about what I was doing at the time, trying to be quite good at it. So it's sort of, like I say, a simple process in how it started, really.
See, like we obviously met one another when I was at Bournemouth, and you were the under-18s and under-23s manager there, weren't you?
Yeah.
Was it difficult? I always wonder, obviously, with coaches that don't necessarily have a playing career, how difficult is it really because people are, listening, especially players, they want to go into coaching. Sometimes the process is quite simple. But for the guys that you see that are managing at any level, and I would argue that when you're involved with Swindon in League One and Leyton Orient at League Two, that's a great level for somebody who hasn't played to go in and manage a club. So what was that process like of trying to get over the perception of that you've had to play to coach at any level?
Yeah, it's to begin with, when I was younger, to walk into a room and gain credibility was really difficult because people didn't give you the respect and credibility off the bat straight away. You had to earn it. Whereas I think the point you make there about people that are retiring and going straight into coaching, the respect of football is already there. People just assume straight away you know what you're talking about because you've worn a pair of boots for the last 20 years. Whereas my thing and the bit that I always hang on to and where I gained or felt like I tried to gain my credibility was I knew when to shut my mouth. I knew when I maybe had been a bit out of my depth, or I knew that people were not particularly listening to my opinions and what I said. And I was fine with that. It was what it was. It was something I've always had to deal with of almost like, well, we'll wait for his opinion because he's not played. And like I say, I totally understand it. But for me, I had to earn the respect a little bit more, I think. I think I had to probably go that little bit further. And I think the bit that I hang on to now, and I think what a lot of players coming out of a playing career and going into coaching would respect in my world now, is the years that I've put into understanding, to studying, to making up the difference between, I don't know what goes on day to day. I don't know what it feels like to make a mistake in a game or do something in particular under a little bit of pressure when the crowd's getting on your back. But I do know how to help people technically get better at that. I do know how to put resilience into people. So I think probably that word there, resilience, for me, right from the very beginning of almost sort of being disregarded. And by the way, I don't mean that like people didn't treat me badly or anything like that. But I knew that I had to wait for my time to come to have my say, have my opinion. Sometimes I didn't really get it, but it's about earning that little bit of credibility rather than sort of having it in the room when you already walk in. Having it to lose, right? I had to work hard to get it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and I'm fine with that.
So what was the process? Can you give us an insight into, I've just named a couple of the clubs where you've been involved in and managed, but the process of your coaching career, step by step, what clubs you were at, and how your perception of football and philosophy of the game was manipulated in and out of which job you went in?
Yeah, I was lucky that at Leyton Orient that when I said about picking kids up and tying their shoelaces, that a big part of that was in the football in the community, working in primary schools, and I did that from while I was at school until I don't know, sort of went through the process of managing those programs and as well as delivering on them, working with a lot of grassroots footballers, development centres, so that sort of build up stage from grassroots into academy football. And I was really lucky that was where I really learned about people, about managing kids, about managing parents, because I was at times 20, 21 and dealing with parents whose kids were on that early pathway to going into academy football, and it was my job to manage all of that. So I would walk in a room sometimes, again, that credibility would be like, this kid's in charge of, whatever process or position it was at the time. And I had to learn how to do that, to learn how to communicate with people. And I think in football, but coaching and teaching, that's a massive part of anything. So I was really lucky that lots of different environments, housing estates, inner city coaching, college programs, like real variety of kids and people that I was coming across every day, every week. We talk about 10,000 hours and learning and progressing, but I was getting all of those opportunities and all of those experiences without even really realising it. So I was really lucky. And I got to sort of my mid-20s and I was really fortunate. A shift and change in the academy meant that I sort of took the academy on for 6 months, managing it was the centre of excellence at the time, but the academy, as everyone knows it now, and I had a 6-month period of just managing it till the end of the season because no one really knew what was going to happen. And obviously did okay, and by the end of that season I was asked to take it on full time. So from then on, at 25, I was an academy manager, a centre of excellence manager. Again, all those experiences the same, because now I was dealing with parents on a different level, and players that were in the system and really working towards becoming professional footballers. So it was a massive eye-opening experience for someone of my age, and I did that for 3 years. And to be honest, you said there about developing my understanding and my philosophy and what I wanted football to look like. I felt like I got to a bit of a point then where I'd only ever experienced Leyton Orient, and it was a little bit like I'm learning off myself and the good people that sort of come and go at first team level, but I'm not learning every day. I haven't got people around me, because at the time it was like man and his dog, really, like in terms of running a centre of excellence. Not how it looks now, with like numerous people that manage different phases and different age groups and are full time at clubs. So I took the decision to go to Tottenham, and that was incredible for me, and shaped so many different things about what I'm about now and what I believe in with regards to development of players and what football can look like at first team football, because the two are obviously completely different, borderline different sports at times, in terms of how you develop players, but how we get results and merge those players into first team football. It's two real big different skill sets. But Tottenham shaped a hell of a lot, because I was fortunate enough to work for someone like John McDermott, Alex Inglethorpe, Chris Ramsey, Perry Suckling, elite people in their field. Tim Sherwood, Les Ferdinand, and then obviously all the people at first team level that came and went, Harry Redknapp, AVB, all those sorts of people. It was an incredible opportunity for me to learn, really, for the first time every day around like what I regard as elite people.
I'm so excited to welcome to the pod our new sponsors, Connection Technologies, a market leader in business-to-business tools ranging from business mobile, hosted telephony and fixed line services. Head over to their website at www.connection-technologies.co.uk, fill in their web inquiry form and find out how Connection Technologies can help your business.
And then off the back of that, I won't go into loads of detail straight away on where and what it all looked like. But I left Tottenham to come to Bournemouth, which is obviously when we met, and I took the 18s predominantly, but again was lucky to work with Chris Hargreaves with the 21s at the time, I think it was, rather than 23s, and to experience some of the bits of loosely working with Eddie and seeing how he works. As you well know, that didn't work out particularly well for me personally, albeit I loved the club and I loved the environment and the boys. I still speak to many of them because of the relationships that we built at the time. But unfortunately, football things and reasons and people, that was a bit of a letdown really quite quickly, which was very disappointing. And then after that, I went to Norwich and done a recruitment role, which was tough at the time, even though that's what I'm doing now. It was a tough experience because I was probably hurting a little bit from my Bournemouth experience a little bit. Then I went back to Spurs and managed some of the international programs that we did. Again, another experience, really, really fortunate to travel to some great places, coaching sort of different in terms of working abroad, working with different people with different languages, and that sort of thing. And then from then on, that's when my entry to first team football, albeit the drastic change from working in America with kids to going into first team football at Swindon. We was there for 2 seasons before I went back to Leyton Orient, and then obviously on to Colchester now, where I'm head of recruitment.
So when I said, look, all these experiences, mate, have obviously shaped your opinion of what footballers look like. You've worked with young players in academies, and I mean like sort of grassroots schoolboys. You've worked with under 18s, under 21s, first teams. Like, you've seen it all, really. What are, I'm going to put it on you a little bit here. What are the most attractive things that you see in players, in your opinion?
I think the first thing's innocence. That's the thing that I think a lot of players come into the environment with is, again, a lot better than I do that. But when you first start out, whether you're coming into a professional football club at the age of 5 or you're coming into it as your first experience as a 15-year-old, the innocence is there. And I think the longer that we can help players and people and footballers maintain that innocence, I think the more we can get freedom, we can get the expression, we can get happy footballers that are going to want to come in with an attitude to develop every day. I think the moment that we create an environment or a scenario where it's too first team related, too focused on the 1% who are going to crack it, the 1% that are going to go on to be elite, I think we then lose the real focuses that can help the individual. So of course, as a coach at Bournemouth, my job was to find the best one, the next one, the one that was going to go into the first team. But at the same time, it was about trying to create an environment where everybody could progress, everyone could develop, everyone came in with that freedom and desire to get better. But the environment where they could make mistakes, where they could improve, where they know that me as their coach cares for them and wants to help them get better. So I think the longer that, with young players specifically, the longer we can hang on to that, the more chance there is of developing it. Again, you know better than me that that's not the reality once it comes into the day-to-day. Resilience becomes a real key element of the environment and what strengths the players have, because there's more setbacks than there is positives. There's probably more down days than there is good days in terms of what you have to go to in order to achieve success, whether that's winning trophies or playing 500 league games. Success can be judged on the individual as well as what the teams do. But I think the longer we can help people hang on to that environment can become so important for people and players to get better. It's
interesting, isn't it, that the things that you've just spoken about aren't necessarily technical or physical, but more mindset sort of stuff and attitude and psychological things. I'm interested, I'd like to focus on something that you just said previously, that youth academy football and first team football are completely different. And a lot of people wouldn't really say that or acknowledge that they are that different. And obviously you've worked in both camps, you've worked with young players in academies and first teams. For the benefit of academy players going into first teams, can you give me an insight into what you mean by that and what the major differences between one environment and the other environment are?
Yeah, I think the first and the easiest one is to reference is obviously winning and losing. I think that's obviously why we all go into football. It's why we all play football pretty much. I mean, there's probably not many out there. I go and watch my son on a Sunday morning, and I'm not particularly bothered whether he wins or loses, but pretty much everybody else at the game wants to win. They don't want to lose. They don't turn up. His manager don't turn up after doing his job all week and hope that they get beat. So I think winning and losing is a real clear definition straight away. But I think in the early stages of academy football, again, when I say early stages, I refer to that as whether or not you're under 9 in your first year of signing at a professional club or you're an under 15. It's all relevant to the individual that comes into the environment. But I think it's about being able to separate the two. So they still become important. They still, one still influences the other, but it's managing the expectation of that. So I think all the way through those early stages, those early years of understanding environments, understanding what your development might look like, which I think we've become as a nation a hell of a lot more aware of that in recent years, probably down to EPPP and what academy football can look like. But I think if we can separate the two and really focus on what individual players do, how they fit into a system, which then fits into a team, and how those responsibilities can impact you as a player, but also impact your team, if that makes sense, without the result being the be all and end all, without the result being the actual outcome that we all judge everything by. And I think with that at the forefront, it then allows us to focus on Joe Partington, the footballer, and not AFC Bournemouth winning the game at the weekend for the 15-year-old. And I think then that gives you and us as coaches the real opportunity to help the individual player get better and improve and get closer to becoming technically, tactically, psychologically, athletically good enough to play whatever level it is that they're going to go and play on. And again, that's where I slightly move away from that 1% all the time, because it's trying to make sure that we cater for everything. And again, I think by removing the real outcome of what happens at the final whistle just gives us a real opportunity to prioritise what should be our priorities, what should be the real thing at the forefront of everything that we do as coaches and people that are trying to develop young players, is that we put the individual at the front of it. And then, of course, there comes a time where we need to teach people how to win. So I think stages in seasons, but it's fantastic now that at 15, 16, there's cup competitions for kids where there is a bit something on it. There is an understanding of an outcome. So then you're talking about decision making at particular times in games, or a mindset to how do we get back into a game, or how do we see this one out? How do we manage the game? Becomes really, really important that then at key points in careers or stages in people's development, we can start to teach the result, start to teach how to win and lose, how to win fouls, how to draw time out of a game, all those sorts of things that then help you and your process and pathway to becoming a professional footballer that's going to use all those attributes in the first team. I've waffled a bit there, but hopefully it makes a little bit of sense.
No, yeah, it does make sense. And I'm interested to find out what your opinion is then on what are the main attributes, because if parents, young players listen to this, and some do, what attributes are the main ones that you think that young guys go on to have successful first team careers?
I've used resilience a few times already, haven't I, in terms of reference to myself. And
what do you mean by resilience?
I think it's
Can you break
numerous
that down?
Yeah, definitely. I think from a player's perspective, collectively, I think I look at myself as a young coach, but dealing with setbacks and understanding that, again, talked about the innocence at the beginning, but people go into the football with that sort of freedom and love for playing football as whenever they start. But dealing with setbacks, dealing with difficult moments, being able to bounce back off the back of a mistake. Resilience might mean that moment in a game. It might mean a bad of performances over 3, 4, 5 games. So it's being able to have that sort of strength of mind and strength of character to bounce back when things are not going particularly well. Like I say, either if it's in the immediate or over a period of time. And then I think in terms of looking at individuals now, I think collectively the very top and the very looking at professional football collectively, there's so many different ingredients that need to come together to help players develop. Athleticism's obviously becoming more and more, and well, it's not even becoming anymore, is it? I don't think you can have a career across the top 5 leagues in our game without being able to to have athletic strengths, whether that's, I think a lot of time we talk about athleticism. People get caught up with this Patrick Vieira, Yaya Toure type viewpoint, and I don't mean that. I mean you can still be small, but you need to be robust, you need to be dynamic, you need to be agile. So I think athleticism is a massive element of where we need to try to get our young players to now, just to be able to survive in any level of professional football.
Yes, just to be able to compete now, isn't it? You've got to be athletic. Like I sort of say that quite a lot. My age 32 now, and I'm playing in the National League. But unless I'm fit or the best possible version of myself, like there's no chance that I'm even really going to play. And it's important for me now at my age that I've got a club to work. Obviously, I've got other stuff going on, but fitness ultimately is the most important thing that you could possibly have.
I think the other thing as well, Joe, with that level of football is that, like I say the top 5 leagues because it is 5 leagues now. Whether or not the National League is seen as that still or not, it's a professional. Like most clubs in it are professional now, aren't they? Yes. The margins are not massive between the top of that league and the top of the league above. But I think gone are the days of having the talented guy who don't look great in his kit, a little bit overweight. I think them days are going, if not gone. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's not many games in all of those 5 leagues now that you go to and you think, not sure about the shape of him, or I don't know if he's going to last the game. Like, I think everybody is an athlete now. So as much as the technical elements and the tactical elements are the things that I really delve into when I think and look at a game of football, athletically, if you can't do it for that sustained 100 minutes in a game now, it's very, very difficult to have a career.
100%. I just want to focus one more time on this word resilience that you've used a couple of times, Ross, because it'd be rude of me to not get your opinion as you've worked with young players, and not only have you worked with young players, but as a first team manager, you gave a lot of debuts. That's at Swindon and at Leyton Orient. A lot of young players now playing the game professionally because of your impact. And that word resilience, do you think that can be taught, or do you think it's just a natural thing?
I think people will have a natural level of resilience that they can or can't call upon. So I think of 1 or 2 managers or coaches that I've worked with that have probably got a higher level of resilience than I have. Emotionally deal with bigger moments in games or bigger periods for the good and the bad than I could. And they're people that you want to learn from, aren't they? And I think until you go through those experiences, it's very hard to judge what your level of resilience is or what you're capable of getting to in that emotional control that is all revolved around resilience and difficult times. But I think from a player's perspective, the big thing for me would be how we're creating setbacks for people, how we are putting obstacles in the way for young players to try to jump over or to try to deal with, because they might not get over them all straight away. They might not. Part of any learning process is, if I'm learning how to pass the ball against the wall, it's going to take me time to get those techniques right. And resilience, I feel, would be the same. So I think as academies, as coaches, how can we create difficult times for young players to understand and deal with? So one of the major things that always sticks out in my career was actually at Bournemouth. So we had FA Youth Cup, which we ended up getting beat by FC Tottenham on penalties. But the process and how that worked for me was one of the biggest things that I learned, and one of the things I refer to all the time when I talk about these setbacks and resilience and trying to create obstacles for players, is that day we played that game was the first day that I had a fully fit squad. All season we'd had niggles and knocks and people out and sickness and whatever else that comes with running a football club or a team. And that day everyone was fit. So, and by the way, that's not like everyone had just got fit because of that. That everyone was fully fit and had trained in preparation for that. And it was, for some of the boys, it was the biggest day of their lives and careers. Everyone was fit. And we also had 2 under-16 players that had been in the squad all season. Talented boys that were going to get their scholarships earlier. Sam Matthews and Joe Quigley that have gone on, Matt Butcher, that have all gone on to have good careers. But we're in our youth team as well, despite still being at school. So I probably had 20-odd players, 21 players that night, all sitting in the change room waiting to find out if they were going to play, which meant that, I don't know if it was 7 subs or 5 subs at the time, which meant that 4 or 5 of them were not even going to get changed. And I remember pulling the 3 or 4 of them and saying, "Listen, boys, I'm really sorry, but you're not going to be involved tonight. You're not even going to be on the bench. You can come out and warm up and take the evening in and the experience, but unfortunately, you're not going to be involved, and it's a setback. Doesn't mean you're not going to be a footballer. Doesn't mean that you're not valued at this club, but the team's being picked tonight, and you're not going to be in it." 3 of them cried. 3 of them cried, and I remember going back in, and the manager at the time went to me, "What are they doing? What are you crying for?" And I was like, "But these boys, it's the biggest night of their careers. They've probably played from the age of 7 every minute of every game. They've never been left out because they're the best player, whether it's in their school team, their Sunday team, or the academy, because they're scholars, they're youth team players. So they would have always been the best player in their team. And then the night of their biggest career, I've just told them they're not getting changed. I'd probably cry. Like it was quite normal for me. But I remember thinking, what setbacks have been put in their way for them to have to deal with? Of course, they would have experienced some naturally, but I can't help but feel that what can we do to help them? Can we randomly at under 13 leave the best player on the bench to start the game at the weekend, which might be, I don't know, Tottenham West Ham or Arsenal Tottenham, and you leave your best player out to get him to understand that randomly these decisions get made, and because of whatever circumstances, he's being left out. Can we set them up to foul or go through moments in training, in games, in the cup games that I just mentioned, that we leave players out, just to using that as an example, so that the big moment like that punches them in the face at 17, 18 isn't as drastic. So, of course, there's lots of other creative ways that we could think about what we do to make things a little bit of a difficulty at times, a little bit of a setback, a little bit of a hurdle to get over, so that when they become into the reality of 17, 18, get left out that night, or they make it into the first team, that the drastic change from development football to first team football isn't quite as huge.
Isn't it incredible that with perspective we can see that those experiences are actually making you a better person and a better player? Because I went through something very similar, that, what you've just described. I was 15 years old in under 16s Welsh national team, right? That was doing the Victory Shield. They do Victory Shield every year. England, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales play against one another. And I was in this Wales under 16 squad. So I was still at school. I kept getting time off of school to go away with this Wales team, which I thought was obviously amazing. And every time I went back to school, my school was a rugby team and they had no football team. So the teachers couldn't really understand what I was doing, but I was telling everybody, no, like I'm going to be on TV. Like the games were on Sky Sports Friday nights. And every time I left school, it was like Friday night, I'm going to be on TV. I sat on the bench for every single game. Like we played England, sat on the bench, didn't come on. Scotland, sat on the bench, didn't come on. Still telling my friends at school, like, oh no, I'll play, like it's going to be on Sky Sports. I was devastated every time I didn't. And that last game, whether or not the manager was just gassing me up or not, he said, like, look, you will get time to play tonight, 100%. Like I was a substitute. He goes, you will come on. I was playing left wing at the time. The left winger got sent off in that game, right? So I never came on. Just cried my eyes out the whole way home from Wales, all the way back down to Portsmouth. Had to go to school, embarrassed. My identity was that I was a football player. But everybody was, asking, oh, so what happened? You didn't play? Like when you had time off school, teachers going, you've had time off school, you didn't even play. Like, what are you doing? Like, why are you spending so much time on this football dream when, it's obviously not working out? I'm sort of starting to question, like, yeah, I think you might be right. Not long after that, I was released by Portsmouth, and I thought, like, what have I just spent all this time doing? Like, felt no good about myself. But in hindsight, those experiences have shaped me into somebody that can take being left out a bit better and having to overcome setbacks a little bit better. But like you're saying, at the time, I had no idea that was a thing. I thought it was the worst day of my life. So I'm just trying to...
And you know what's really important, I think, is that it's the worst day of your life, but possibly the biggest highlight in your life as well at the same time. Like you're on the bench for your national team at your age group, but you've seen it and come away from it as like a major setback, and you're going into school hanging your head in shame, and you think, just been on the bench for my national team. So, like, it's massive. I think it's huge in terms of that experience that so many people all over the world would have like killed for that opportunity to sit on that bench that night. But you come away from it looking upon it as as a major negative. And I think, like, again, going back to those like small percentages, those the 1% or 0. Whatever percent of it is of young players that make it these days. If you look at, again, like I said there about developing people and as well as developing players, had you not gone on to have the career that you've had, you still would have looked back on that moment as a massive point in your life or your career. I'm probably sounding overly drastic, and there'll be football people sitting there thinking, like, shut up, what you're talking about. But we've got a responsibility of developing people and people that are going to go into other industries and other walks of life that will look back on what they've learned through football and learned in their footballing experiences, whether that's at grassroots or academy football or professional football. Once people leave the industry, that they will be able to call upon massive, massive moments and resilience. There's things that I've gone through in my career that I feel like I could walk into a lot of different industries and go, yeah, I'll have a go at this because of the setbacks and the difficulties that I've experienced through football.
I remember, moving on a couple of years, especially in my career, sort of stroked my own ego a little bit, so I've just put myself down. But I ended up captaining the under-21s quite a number of times. I remember the coach saying to me, remember when you didn't get on as an under-16, like you've done incredibly well to get to this point. And I think when you do achieve, when you have to overcome a setback and you do suddenly achieve something, like it does feel that much better. I'm talking about this not to highlight my own success, because I didn't really have that much, but to gain perspective for people that just because you might suffer a setback, and I'm getting your opinion on as a coach that's worked with a lot of good, talented young players, is that setbacks can actually shape you and can actually end up as a positive more often than you think. Yeah,
immensely. And like you said there, like there'll be so many points that you can refer back to, and I think that's why it's so important to, as a coach, as clubs looking at the players that are in the development phase of their lives and their careers, is that we look at what we continuously can do to help them develop. And I'd like to say resilience has been one of the key things that we've focused on, but being able to deal with setbacks in life is always going to trip you up. So whether you'd have gone on to have the career that you've had or not, like I said already, you'd have always referred back to that as a massive moment of being able to deal with disappointments, or not if you didn't at the time, do you know what I mean? But it would have given you some sort of strength to or emotion to relate back to having experienced, let's say, like the biggest moment in your life, but you're walking around school holding your head in shame when really, like, you're probably the most popular kid walking through the streets because you've been on the bench for the team.
I was trying to dip out in and out of obviously your career in football, Ross, so we can gain perspective over different things. So I wanted to talk about your role at the moment a little bit, because different people won't understand different roles in football that are listening to this. They might do, obviously, if they're involved in the game. But your role now as obviously head of recruitment at Colchester, what does that look like, and what are you responsible for at the club at the moment?
So my dominant area of my role is player recruitment at the first team level for Colchester. So when I went into the job at the end of last season, beginning of this, the sole focus was to identify players and sign players for the first team in a simplistic view. But at the same time, as a club, we didn't have particular structures in place within the recruitment department of how we would do that. So I think a lot of people have an understanding of recruitment, and to a degree I probably did, before working around first team football, that you just go and try and find the best players. But as you well know, there's a lot more that goes into it than that. How we identify, profiling of players, and what does a Colchester player look like? How do we go about approaching players, approaching clubs, working with agents in order to put those processes in place to get the best possible players that we want to come and play at our club. And then, of course, going out and watching and building up a knowledge and database of players, because the landscape's forever changing. So it was about having databases in place that we were going to be able to refer to when it came to identifying the types of players that we wanted. We spent a lot of time over the summer and even still now looking at exactly what that looks like. So we talked about, athletically, technically, tactically, the types of players that have had the experiences that we think is going to suit and help a club like Colchester and the identity that we're working towards. So immediately it was that, really trying to fill the gaps of players that had come and gone over the summer that were going to help us try and improve. And then the longer that I've been at the club, my role as head of recruitment means that I work with and oversee the staff in the academy as well, which I think for me is always going to be really important. So even if that wasn't one of my elements of my role that the club had asked me to take on, I still would have anyway, because I'm passionate about what the young players at the club are doing. Predominantly I focus on the older end of the academy, because there's not enough hours in the day for me to worry about under 9s and under 10s. But what I do try to do is help the scouts that are working with the particular age groups to identify what processes, what areas we can go and approach, what types of players we want to see coming through the club. And then obviously they can then come to me and talk to me about, what it takes to get there, what strengths, what elements of a young player do we need to be looking for as a recruitment team to go and make sure we've got a consistent line of players coming in that are going to challenge the current players that are there, that are going to help them get better, and ultimately try to produce players for the first team at Colchester. So incredibly exciting to go out and watch clubs and players and teams at different levels, try and build relationships to make sure that we're the ones at the front of the queue when players are perhaps being released or available for loan from Premier League clubs. So networks of people is obviously really, really important. But collectively, as that head of recruitment, I sort of try to pull everything together from what comes. I don't like using the phrase underneath, but I know you know what I mean by that when it comes to the young players that are coming through.
You know what football's like, Ross, and my teammates are asking me, most days off are spent speaking to people within football, and who are you going to speak to tomorrow? I said, I'm going to speak to my friend Ross Embleton, who's head of recruitment at Colchester. I've got loads of young lads at Aldershot going, tell him about me. Tell him about me. What is the process, the first initial signs of the process of identifying a player?
I think the first one is internally. So tell them I probably know about them anyway. So and I'll make my mind up about whether or not I sign any of them. And if I do, I'll give you all the credit.
Perfect.
I think, first of all, it's internally. It's what do we need in terms of, the simple way of looking at that is, we might need a right back, for example. But what does that right back need to look like? So we mentioned athleticism, and it's probably a good position to me to just pluck out, because at the moment, probably our best, most consistent performer is a 19-year-old, incredible athlete, technically very good, can play off of both feet. So now all of a sudden the profile of a Colchester fullback fits with that. If we were to ever lose Junior or sell Junior on, I need to be prepared to replace him. So internally we need to all consistently review what the expectation is of a right back. Time and circumstances can obviously influence that. So it's probably, again, a good example at the moment that we haven't had a great start to the season. So at present, going and signing a 17, 18-year-old to put into the first team straight away becomes very, very difficult. It's looking for players that maybe have a few more experiences, that have gone through maybe a similar experience in this league, in the league above, so that they can call upon that and help us in our current situation. But it's forever... with the chairman and the board being the way that they are, it's forever trying to aspire to be better. So it's about us looking for players that are going to improve us. So yes, can we get out of the situation that we might be in now, but in the longer term, can we kick on and move towards the top half of the league and the playoffs and promotion, rather than consistently looking at staying away from the bottom, if that makes sense. So internally, the first part of the process is to really analyse what we've got and what we need to do to improve. And then for me, when I first walked into the job, again, like I say, it was a bit of a blank slate. So it was about trying to put together a reporting system on what was going to help us analyse the players that I would be analysing every week, to build up a database. So really, really understanding the not just the best players, but the most suitable players in under 21s. For me, in the National League, League Two, probably the bottom half of League One in terms of where we target our finances. Still looking for the gems in non-league, and also looking at countries like Ireland and Scotland, where we're going to be able to pull on players that are relevant for our level and are going to help make us better. So it's about trying really at the beginning. Part of that process was to put all of that in place before then I start going out and saying, right, Joe Parkinson, I really like him. He's good at this. His qualities suit us because of A, B, and C. And then really now, especially as we're coming towards January, it's about putting together a real deep profile on your character, on your strengths and weaknesses, your experiences. So have you suffered with injuries over your career that might hinder you playing 3 games a week, which is an incredibly big, important part of playing in League Two. So that's about delving deeper. It's about me speaking to you about those young players that you might be referring and understanding, do they match with Colchester, but have they got the qualities that are going to come and match up with being a League Two footballer? Like I say again, character references, salary is really important, your home life, where home is. Again, full well that the minute you live or stay at a club miles away from home, you're forever sort of looking over your shoulder, wondering when you're going to get back to see your family. And all those sorts of circumstances are going to be massive in terms of influencing who and what types of players that we sign. So it's not just about turning up on a Saturday and watching a good footballer play for all the shots under 23s. There's a lot more depth that goes into it.
Yeah, there is an enormous amount that goes into it, mate, isn't there? Probably didn't have that much perspective myself on actually how much detail you guys go into. And something I wanted to get into about, I've actually, touched on it then, but I've got it written down, is at Colchester's level, we're talking sort of like mid-table to lower level of League Two. There are so many footballers, as you're aware at the moment, mate, there are so many footballers out there that might be in Premier League academies, 23s, or might be young National League South, North players who are looking to progress. And Colchester sort of sat in between the two, sat in between these young, talented Premier League Championship academy players and the non-league players that may be a little bit more raw, a little bit less polished, but are so desperate to progress. How much time, this might obviously just be Colchester in particular, that's the reason why you're here, but how much time do you spend looking above at these young guys that are maybe looking for a loan or that are being released from academies, and how much time is spent looking below where you think we might get this gem out of non-league that might go on to move on again?
I think the first thing for a club like us and many clubs in League Two, probably most of League One as well, is manpower. We're not blessed with millions of scouts that go out and watch games every week. So it's about trying to have your finger on the pulse the best way possible. So the first thing you have to do is listen and take the numerous amount of phone calls from agents. But like you said there, on a day like today, you're on the phone to different people with different networks that working at different levels of football to try to work out through people who you trust their opinions on particular players. And football being the way that it is, it's a small industry. A lot of people know each other, but it's being able to call upon the people that you trust to be able to have valued opinions and input on all of those things that I just mentioned. But first and foremost, the qualities of a footballer. A lot of my time is spent on the laptop, on reading, not necessarily the newspaper, but that sort of thing in terms of working out that, who are the best performers in terms of top goal scorers, clean sheets, percentages. So obviously statistically now across the 3 leagues that I mentioned, but I mentioned Scotland and Ireland as well, is statistically we can draw upon a hell of a lot of information now that tells me exactly really what your strengths and weaknesses are in games. So a lot of my time throughout the week is spent reading and analysing and trying to pick out the players that are performing well. And then fortunately throughout the week, games programs are that 21s football now is played in the week, Monday, Friday, loosely around some other days as well. But it's about, for me, being out at a lot of those games. So what I try to do is be clever or crafty in terms of where I go, where we send our scouts in terms of, if I go and watch Tottenham, do I need to go and watch Tottenham West Ham? Because we've got good networks and good contacts at those 2 clubs. But I might pick out Tottenham when they play Blackburn. So I can pick out the northern teams to come and watch, and we can start to cover and database all of those players of, he's the very best one. he's probably not going to come to Colchester, but who are the players that have got the strengths in that type of football to come in and play at our level, or have a loan where they're going to be able to impact our level. And then the same with league football and non-league football as well. It's about distributing people and players to go and see the players that are performing well at a particular time, to cover games so that we've got a real broad knowledge. We're never going to cover everything. I don't think anyone covers everything, but it's vitally important now, I think, to be able to have your finger on the pulse with what goes on in non-league football, because there's so many good players out there, players that have been released from clubs for whatever reason. Things haven't gone their way in particularly, but they've gone out and given themselves a platform to come again, as well as, like I say, respecting what the Premier League clubs do. But like I say, a lot of it is about networking, but then also putting in the time and the hours and the miles to get out to games and watch people and watch games properly and pick players out. And that's one of the things I've really learned, I think, in the last sort of 4 or 5 months is I would have gone to a game this time last season and come away thinking, didn't like the way they played there, or they didn't play it from the back, or they were quite direct. I sort of removed that now, and I can go and watch individual players and sort of dust myself down afterwards and not worry too much about what the game looked like. It's about trying to identify the players or make sure I've got some knowledge on them, were they to start performing and have an understanding of what they're about.
One of the things that you just said then that's sort of stuck in my mind, I want to get a little bit further into on, is that you said that you read a lot of, online to gather insight into players and to how teams have done and things like that. And I think something that's relevant at the moment that wasn't when we both started in the game is social media. And I've never been big on it as a player. Like I don't post anything or interact with any supporters or anything like that. But how much of a big deal for somebody like yourself in a role of head of recruitment is social media? Because let's say, I'll create a situation for you. I'm a super talented player that doesn't post anything on social media. So I might go under the radar, or I might be an all right to quite talented player who's constantly posting and constantly. I'll give you an example just recently. My friend Tom Lockyer, England beat Wales last night, so Wales are coming home, but he made his way into the Welsh national team for the World Cup. So, he was part of the squad. For whatever reason, in the past 3 or 4 camps, he wasn't picked. He's been playing so well for Luton recently, but I know for a fact he would have told his social media guy, hype me, because all I saw on Luton's Instagram for the last 4 or 5 weeks before the team was picked, before the squad was announced, was his face after every game, making this block, man of the match, picture of him wearing a captain's armband, like constant. So it was obviously generating interest in him. He could have been rubbish because I didn't see the games, but I just thought, he must be playing well. How much of an impact does that sort of stuff have on somebody in your role?
I think if you're lazy, I think a hell of a lot. And I don't, by the way, I don't mean that like dismissively of pointing the finger at anyone being lazy, but I think it's a very easy situation to get sucked into. And I suppose anyone on those sorts of platforms is called an influencer for a reason in terms of the impact that they can have on people. But I think you've got to be aware of it. I'm like yourself. Like the moment I went back to Orient, it's going to be released that you're coming back to the club in a coaching capacity, and I said, give me a minute, I just need to delete my Twitter or whatever it was that I had at the time. And they were like, no, it's going to be positive, like you was at this club as a kid and da-da-da. And I said, yeah, but somewhere along the line it's not, so I'll get rid of it now, and then I won't hear all the good stuff, but I won't have to deal with all the rubbish stuff if it ever happens. So and I'm fine with that, and that's not for everyone, but that's just how I was. So I feel like I can put social media into a little bit of perspective, and don't let it affect me too much. But I think at the same time in my job, I've got to be aware of it. So I think it'd be quite easy to just every Saturday night go through Twitter or whatever other platforms and look and see what clubs are picking out or what fans are saying about players. But I think it's a very dangerous situation to let yourself get impacted or influenced by people's opinions, when ultimately it should be about my opinion and even bigger than that, what the club needs and the particular manager at the time. So we'll sign players right now that will help the manager and help the team right now, but we'll also sign players of 17, 18 that the manager might not ever see, for the good or the bad, in terms of the manager being there for the longer term or moving on to bigger and better things. But we'll sign players that will impact the club and help the club. So I think it'd be very naive of me to really use that, but as my source or resource to be able to look and identify players. But at the same time, I think the levels of football that maybe I can't get in touch with, or I haven't got enough time to go and watch, I can use it to have an awareness of, the local player playing at step 6 or step 7 that scored 14 goals already this season. It's important that I know that he's not good enough. And I'd love him to be good enough to take one from non-league and he goes on to be the next Ian Wright, for example. But I need to know that I'm aware enough of, I know so-and-so, he's worked with him. Yeah, he's a good player. He might play further up the ladder, but he's not quite a league player just yet. So I think I can use it, and we definitely do use it for that. I think the other thing that you mentioned there is massively important in terms of like finalising, are we going to sign this guy or not? You have to take that into consideration, because I think you can pick up a little bit more understanding of his extracurricular activities, what he does socially, how he interacts with people, what's going to happen when we lose a few games and he wants to shout his mouth off on social media. I think them things are massive, because it will only draw more attention on people, and it will ultimately, it might not totally sway whether or not you sign a player, but I think it's something you have to be aware of that he's had these incidents on social media, or he's really quiet, he's quite private. That helps you understand the bigger picture of what you're signing, because as you well know, the character of players coming into the dressing room every day is so important.
Yeah, I'm interested in that, because I know it's relevant these days as social media is such a big part of the game. And I'm a bit stuck in my ways as an older player now, that I think, these young guys are constantly posting highlights and this and that and the other. But actually, like, I'm fully aware that if I was their age, I'd probably do something similar, because it's a quite easy way to almost show yourself off, I suppose, isn't it? I bet you get sent a ridiculous amount of highlight reels and all stuff like that. And it actually is relevant in the game now that people are representing themselves, not just with an agent, but in any way that they possibly can, in a positive way possible.
Yeah, and of course those things help. I'm again a little bit like yourself. I'm a little bit old-fashioned in terms of, like when I will have, when I pick my phone up after this interview, 8 agents that have sent me players and their highlights reels, and it's great, but I'd much rather them just send me the name of the player, because I won't watch the highlight reel, because it's not going to be the fullback kicking it in the stand because he's got his pass wrong up the line. It's going to be him dribbling and flicking it through someone's legs. Again, like, all fantastic attributes, but I'm not going to sign a player with that. And by the way, I know that they're doing it just to spark a little bit of attention, so it's not me being that naive. But I will take that player away, and if he's playing in the league or I've got access to watch him video-wise, I'll do my digging and my research in a lot more detail rather than watching that. But I think I use the word lazy, and it sounds a bit disrespectful, but there will be people out there. There will be scouts out there that are working, reading, seeing these things, and taking them to the head of recruitment, going, "Have you seen this? That might be the moment that turns someone's head, and the early stages of getting someone's attention to sign a player." So I think it's fantastic that people have got the resources to do that now. For me, it just doesn't impact me enough, because I know that I'm not going to watch someone miss time ahead. I'm going to see him bringing it down on his chest and bringing it out from the back.
Do you find that there's any difference then between when you must have been in a situation now, you've signed guys from lower than Colchester and guys from above Colchester, whatever age. Is there a difference, do you think, between the guys that come from above to Colchester or the guys from below to Colchester? Is there a difference between the two players?
I think it depends on age and experiences. If you're going to sign a player that's hardened to playing in League One every week, him adapting to League Two perhaps wouldn't be quite as drastic. But when we talk about the speed of the game and athleticism that we've already referred to, if you're coming from for example, from a part-time level of football, obviously that takes some time to transition and adapt to getting a grip with it. I think what you find now in terms of young players that are being released from a lot of clubs, and we perceive it as them dropping down from that level to League Two, as opposed to someone that's been released 2 or 3 years earlier and gone out and played and earned a little bit more credibility in terms of playing men's football and a little bit more hardened to life, I suppose. I think you sometimes detect that little bit more hunger, and again, that can look as a bit more of a slant on the players coming out of bigger clubs. I don't mean it like that. It's just a reality that people have gone out and had to earn themselves a living, go and get themselves a job, scrap and train on a Tuesday, Thursday night rather than being in an environment where they're training and playing every day. I don't massively sign up for this. Oh, it's all lovely and nice at top clubs. I don't believe in that. I think inside you, you've got that burning desire to be a footballer. So whether you're someone that's coming from being, in a wonderful environment from the age of 9, or someone that's come through, and been playing non-league football for the last 3 or 4 years, I think it's about the individual and the qualities that you've got as a person and a player that are going to be able to make you capable. And then, of course, it's about athleticism. It's about how good you are technically, tactically, how you can take on information and deal with the stuff that we've already talked about.
I'd like to go back to your coaching a bit, mate, now. As I know we're dipping in between the two, but you've been involved in a certain style of play the whole time, really, that you've been involved in first teams, which is difficult because, as you know, results business, and if you don't win games, suddenly your perspective on how football should be played is wrong. And when you do win games, everybody wants to tell you you're an amazing coach who plays a certain style. And every time that, we've played against, when I was at Bristol Rovers, I played against your Swindon team in the reserves, we've played against your Swindon's first team. We always sort of have spoken in our lives about football and how we believe it should be played and what good players look like and necessarily what bad players look like. But when you were coaching a certain style of play, because not all teams do that at the levels that you were at, what did you find in players that was easy, I wouldn't want to say easy to manage, but the players that want to learn your certain style of play, those guys on the training ground that you could give ideas to, and then they would take that. What did, if you as a coach, what did that look like? Who were the players that were on board and easy to coach, and what did the players that weren't look like? What was the difference between the two?
I think, first of all, interesting the two sort of dynamics of the two different first team of two different clubs that I worked with him. Because obviously at Swindon there was a set style already. They'd already had previous experience or the season before.
Was it Mark Cooper?
Yeah, so Mark Cooper and Luke were already there,
yeah.
and then myself and Martin Ling went there, and Martin quickly left with an illness. So Luke and I took the team on. Luke was the manager.
I might add now that obviously Luke is the Notts County manager, and they play total soccer. They're basically the Man City of National League. They're exceptional. Incredible.
And I think, first of all, at Swindon it was different because that style of play was already in place. So to go in there and work and support in the early stages, support Luke to deliver what was in place from the chairman and the board at the club. Players had already been recruited to fit that system. So to teach them, to develop them, to get them to understand and want to do it was quite straightforward, because they'd been brought to the club to pretty much do that. It was a fairly young squad in both seasons, and probably our undoing in a second year that we were too young and didn't lack enough experience to help us to deliver the performances to win games. But I think what I found is that it was a style of play, and it was an environment, because it isn't just about sending the team out there on a Saturday afternoon to pass the ball. It's about the culture that you try to develop. And I think culture is an easy word that gets thrown out in football a lot of the time now. But it was a constant strive to want to be good at it. And every Monday morning or after a day off, we would come in and there would be constant conversations about what Barcelona had done the night before, or Arsenal or Chelsea, whoever the top performers were at a particular time. So culturally, everyone bought into it. So it made it a hell of a lot easier to, if we wanted to try something new, or we wanted to tweak the formation or the way that we played out from the goalkeeper, for example, the players were very, very much on board. And it was about also working with the real strong personalities in the group to be able to make sure that we stuck to a particular system. So that was quite straightforward. When I went to Orient, in the outset, I worked as assistant to Steve Davis, who'd come from Crewe, and Steve has just recently been with the first team at Wolves. Fantastic coach, great guy. Had unbelievable development experiences at Crewe, which is obviously very unique. But he came into the club and his coaching was very good. We had a real horror run of bad results that meant we went from like the top of the league to looking over our shoulders at potential relegation. And there had been a lot of damage done previous owners at the club, and the recruitment had been very difficult because we only had a 3-week pre-season, and sound like excuses, but there was a lot of factors that we lost players within. But we played a a good style of football, but not probably as extreme as we had done at Swindon. So that was fairly straightforward for the group and the players that we had at the time. Justin Edinburgh came in as the manager. We had incredible success. Justin's philosophy was brilliant. The day he came in, I did all the coaching. We were very much up and at you, very aggressive without the ball, press teams, had a lot of energy all over the pitch. We didn't particularly play from the goalkeeper, but that was one of his things to me when he came in was, I don't particularly want us to play and have the ball at the back of the pitch. I want us to get in the opposition's half as quickly as possible and create opportunities to cross and get balls into the box. So it made my life as a coach quite straightforward. And albeit I'd had a experience at first team football at Swindon, which was extremely different to that, as a coach I felt like I needed to be adaptable. And I actually really, really enjoyed coaching a completely different style. It wasn't the football that I would have turned on the telly, but it got us success and we won the league and got Orient out the National League. So that was a great experience. But then when I took over as the manager, we'd gone up a level. We still had a number of players in the squad that were with the previous squad in the National League and experienced that high of promotion and obviously the real low of losing Justin as well. But we went into that league and in the early stages we just stuck to what we'd been doing. And one of the things that everyone advised me to do when I took over as manager was be myself and do what I found as being natural and not try to do what other people did. And I was watching my team from time to time and thinking, this isn't particularly me. And I didn't think we had enough control on the game. Physically, we were very, very fit and strong and athletic in the National League, but we wasn't quite as fit and strong to play without the ball as much in League Two. So I felt like I needed my team to have more of the ball in order to give us a chance to cope physically. So we started to evolve just before COVID, started to work towards a bit of a different shape, about having possession of the ball a little bit more. And then obviously in COVID hit and the second season we went a lot more extreme in terms of us having the ball. But at the focus of that wasn't particularly that I felt like it was what I wanted all the time. It was what I felt met the group's needs and also allowed us to make up the margins between being an average team physically out of possession. I felt if we had more of the ball, that we didn't spend as much time running after it, so therefore we weren't quite as vulnerable to winning and losing games. So probably didn't get us to the point where we were attacking and aggressive enough in terms of the chances and that we created, but those things take time, don't they?
As somebody, Ross, who's obviously got an eye to improve a player, I'd like to know, in your opinion, how much of the responsibility of development lies on your shoulders as a coach or manager from any age, talk about first team players, young players, and how much responsibility lies on the shoulders of the actual player?
I think I'm passionate about it, and I think that as the manager of Leyton Orient, I spent a lot of my time concerned, is that the right word? Focused on the young players. So there was times when I probably should have finished training and gone in the office and done something that was more management behaviour, but I chose to stay out and work with the young players and oversee what my coaching staff were doing, the extra work that the players were doing, whether that was physically or technically or video analysis. I wanted to be involved in that all the time because I was passionate about helping those players, about helping those coaches to help the players, and also helping the coaches to get better and the staff to get better. I was extremely passionate about that, and it's something I'd always done, but probably something I should have left alone a little bit. And then I think it's massively about the player. It's about whether or not he really, really wants to do it. So again, I can think back. I won't mention no names, but I can think back to the latter stages of the players that were getting in my team at Leyton Orient, or the boys that I felt were going to and have gone and played a lot more games in the first team. I could see the ones that were desperate to do it. I could see the ones that were desperate to not just get into Leyton Orient's team, but to get into Leyton Orient's team and then go and play for someone else's. And kick on in the Orient team, but then get moves and play at a better level and try and aspire to reach the top. Which I think ultimately, as the coach, we have to try to set those players up to aspire to be the very, very best. And if they don't reach the very, very best, that they make the very, very best of what they've got. So I could see, and I can still see, the characters that really had that drive to stay out after training and do the workout on the pitch, which I think is the easy bit, to work on your crossing or your heading or your first touch or your finishing, but then to come off and go and eat properly and then go in the gym and then finish in the gym and want to sit down with the analyst or me to watch their footage or their clips or someone else's clips, because it's not just about watching what you did well or good, bad or indifferent at the weekend. It's about watching the best players in your position if you want to be the very best or make the very best of what you're going to be, because I think that's really important as well. It's not just necessarily about, I spoke about the 1% at the beginning, it's not just about being a Premier League player, is it? It's about you being the very, very best individual that you can be. So I think we can lead people towards it, and I'd like to think that the clubs that I've worked at, we've really driven that to the point. At Bournemouth, we were training at I can't think, Chapel Gate by the airport, out on our own, nowhere near the first team. Circumstances were not brilliant, but we made the very, very best of it. And I know now that boys that work in offices or work in recruitment have had nothing to do with football, but we constantly drove to try and make it a more fun environment and one that people could develop within. But if you're going to be or want to be very best at something, whether it's football or something else, you've got to want to do it yourself and you've got to put the time in to do it. A
lot of those boys in your Bournemouth under-18s have gone on to have careers though, right? A lot of them still playing.
Yeah, I mean, I look through it. I'm Bailey Cargill, and the great thing is I still speak to a lot of them on the phone. Like I say, it was me and them in a field. Do you know what I mean? Most of the days, and it was fantastic. And like I said already, I loved the environment. I loved living in Bournemouth. I loved what the club was about. And I love that group of players. So there's so many of them that are not playing that I still speak to. They've gone on to have kids now and stuff like that, which is just as important for me to see the ones that have played. But in terms of this being a podcast about footballers, you got Bailey Cargill still playing in the league, Joe Quigley playing for Chesterfield, Sam Matthews' unfortunate injury at the back end of last season, but already having a good career, Matt Butcher, Ollie Harfield. There's a number of those boys that weren't necessarily in my team, but Josh Carmichael was in and out of the first team. So yeah, a number of those boys. I've probably missed one or two, so I apologise if I have. But there's a number of them in that group that are still playing now, which is obviously fantastic to see.
Just before I put you under I'm going to put you under pressure now. But just before I put you under pressure with some sort of quick fire-ish questions, I'd like to try and finish with the 3 top attributes you feel like players need to become professionals or to be successful professionals, and the 3 attributes that you cannot have if you're going to have a successful career. So we'll start with the 3 that you think the players should all have.
I think resilience, because we've touched upon it. I think I have to go with that one. If I didn't now, it'd be ridiculous in terms of some of the conversations. I think a belief. So I don't know if the two go together, but I think it's belief in you. It's belief in where you are and what you're doing at that time. So we've talked about playing style in the last couple of questions, but it's being able to believe. So like I said there, I've experienced 2 real extremes and got success from the one that people probably wouldn't associate with me and the styles that I've been involved with. So it's about having a belief in the people and the process or the situation that you're in at that time. And then I think you desire, but I don't mean that in terms of like, you've got to be able to edit and tackle people when it's under pressure, but desire to get better, the desire to want to improve, to be able to push yourself and push others. I think that's a real key one that I've probably learned since I was out of football and been in this position that I'm in now is being able to push other people, to be able to influence others and have the desire to make other people better around you in order to help you and your team at a particular time. So again, probably what we touched on at the beginning, none of those things are technical, tactical, but very much related to you as an individual and you as a person.
It's incredible, isn't it, how big of a deal character falls into sort of the level of football that you might end up playing. It could almost outweigh sometimes your actual ability in terms of the influence that you have on others and the change room and stuff.
And then I think what they do though is they help you become a better player as well, don't they? So we talked about kicking the ball against the wall, which is probably a very, very dark-aged reference to make. But if you want to get better and you've got a number of those different things and you mess them up, you need resilience to refer to, and you need to constantly be able to push yourself and believe in what you're doing and what you're being told. Sometimes there's experts or there's people telling you things that are perceived as experts that you might not totally agree with. So you need to go out and re-educate or reassess what it is and how it's going to influence you. So I think it's all of those things do also impact the football bits as well.
And what about the 3 things that you think guys can't be or can't have if they're going to go on to be successful professionals?
So you mean in terms of things you wouldn't want them to have, or don't want them to look for? I think like reverse some of that is that I think you can be vulnerable. I think you can be and it's not when I talk about having good people in the right people. I think you can be a nice guy. I think you can be timid and not have like a massive like ego and big personality. But I think you've got to be able. I think it's very, very difficult if you suffer with difficulty and setbacks and things impact you and influence you a hell of a lot. So I think it's that's something I think I've really seen is people being able to deal with or not being able to deal with those real sort of adverse moments and difficulty. I think if you haven't got discipline now, I think it's really difficult. I think it's really difficult.
Define the word discipline.
I think is numerous different things. So again, I've referred to staying out after training, to eating, sleeping properly, to being in the gym or living your life right. But obviously the flip side of that is, if you don't do those things, if you haven't got the focus to go out and do extra work, to commit yourself to the career. So I think if you haven't got that now, I think it's really, really difficult to survive or to reach the. I think years ago you would have been able. There would have been players that made a career or had success off of pure ability. I'm not sure if it's as easy as that now. I think the last one as well is, again, touched upon it at the beginning. I think athleticism is so important. So probably the first attribute that I've referred to that relates to
the game,
out on the pitch. But I do think now it is so important. And again, it's not about being able to run 100 metres in 10 seconds. It's not about being able to run 14 kilometres every single game, but it's being dynamic, it's being powerful, it's being, I know you've interviewed people like Sam Vokes that, they've got a physical attribute that can help them survive and compete in the game, amongst others. I think that the elite have got 2 or 3 or 4, haven't they? But I think to have a career in professional football now, you've got to have a level or an outstanding attribute of some type that can help you. And like I say, you can be small, but dynamic. You can be small, you can be powerful, you can be small and agile, you can be big and quick, you can be big and strong, whatever it might be. But I do think that now the way the game's going at every level, you've got to be able to be athletic.
100%. Let me just fire some of these at you then, mate. I've got 7 to get through, but I might delve deeper into some of them off the back of your answers. But number 1 is, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Cool. 2, but the first one was when I was a kid, and I've referred to it loosely, was sometimes shut up and don't have an opinion. I think that's probably a good one. I mean, Justin Edinburgh's famous one that I quoted when he passed away was that we're not here for the sake of it, we're here for the ease was the effing memories. But he's one of that was one thing that always sticks with me. It was about being in this to make memories. But from a professional perspective, I was told as a young coach, I don't know whether that was telling me to shut up and not have an opinion, but it was very much like sometimes be in the room, but you don't have to have an opinion. And I thought, actually, you can listen to a lot of people's information, and you don't always have to impose your own.
That's not a bad shout, actually. Second one, mate, is who's the most outstanding talent that you've ever worked with, and what was it about him that has made you say that?
I didn't work with him, but I was lucky enough to work at Tottenham when Harry Kane was coming through. So I have to say that obviously it's easy because of what he's gone on to do, but I actually remember when his first loan was at Leyton Orient, and I'd left, and for natural obvious reasons, they'd spoken to me about any young players, as well as obviously the more senior staff at the club that potentially they could take on loan. And I wasn't exactly sure whether Harry Kane was going to be a out-and-out number 9 or a number 10. I think he's shown that he can do both half decently now. But the one thing, even before he cracked it, that I could see in him was his desire and his work ethic to get better. When you see that goal that he scores so often, where he like sweeps it across the goal and it doesn't seem to leave the grass, it doesn't seem to be moving that quick, but the goalkeeper never reaches it. He was forever finishing that draggy type goal into the far corner, and I can see him out there now at the bottom pitches at Spurs Lodge in Chigwell, not the training ground that they've got now, but I could see him outside working on numerous elements of his game. So there's a lot of other talented players. We mentioned Sam Matthews earlier, which not a lot of people would know about, but Sam as a 15, 16-year-old was an unbelievable talent. So extreme the other way, and Sam's obviously suffered a lot of injuries. There's been a number of other boys that I've worked with, and I think there's a number that I left behind at Leyton Orient that could go on to have very good careers, but I know Harry's an easy one to pick up, but his work ethic to get better was frightening.
Obviously, this thing with Harry Kane, a lot of people see his early career and his loans, and that might be unsuccessful, and it's quite often that elite players go straight into a first team and crack it, don't they? But he didn't. But you know what you're saying is you saw behind the scenes that he was working relentlessly hard, and so ultimately his success isn't just off the back of being lucky; it's off the back of hard work.
No, and don't get me wrong. Like, there wasn't a time where when he went on loan to Orient, and Orient fans that I knew would go to me, "Oh, what's a kid like we got from Orient, Harry Kane?" I wasn't going like he's going to come here and score you 15 goals a season. I wasn't watching him practice his free kicks or whatever it was out on the training ground, going, "Oh, this kid's going to be a top player." Like, I won't try and steal that limelight at all. But now he has. It wasn't through just being pretty good at football that's got him there. It was an incredible, intense application and focus to, and again, my favourite word probably from the podcast has been resilience, hasn't it? But all those loans didn't go well. You know, there was moments, I think there's famous pictures of him and Vardy and whatever sitting on the bench at Leicester, and he went on loan to Millwall, and all those experiences have helped shape him, and his pathway's been a completely different one to what Wayne Rooney's was, for example. But that's an immense pathway that he's done to go on to be one of the best strikers the country's ever seen.
Fingers crossed this podcast blows up, mate. Might be able to get him on here one day. Number 3. What do you think that all young players should know on their journey aspiring to be a professional?
That it's not going to be easy. I think that's the pathway for all of us. You talked about your experience of your early days going with the Welsh national team, but I think it's important to understand that, yes, we all set out to play football because we love it, and I said about holding on to the innocence and stuff for as long as we possibly can, but the reality of it is, as the coach, as the manager, as the head of recruitment, as the player, young or experienced, it's not going to be an easy pathway, and I think it's really important to understand that it's going to be very, very difficult along the way to get to hopefully where you want to get to.
This next one's slightly obscure, but football has moved on so much in terms of recruitment in the last 10 years. Where do you think it will be in 10 years' time from now?
Incredibly amount that it's moved along. I think statistically, there's a hell of a lot of players that I think at the very top, statistically, it really can impact the type of player that you sign, because the consistencies and the access to players and what they are and aren't capable of is huge. So I think that's going to continue to implement and influence the game and how we recruit. I think certainly, again, at our level, we haven't got the platforms and the access to the wide amount of information that potentially Man United would have. But it still helps. It still helps me understand, if I'm looking for a centre-half that can head it, that what his succession rates are like aerially in the league that he's performing in, if there's data for that level of football, of course. So again, like just plucking out that one attribute, but it does what in the immediate helps me narrow down the search straight away. So I think video and statistics is going to continue to be a massive influence, which it already is at Brentford, at Brighton, at You mentioned Luke at Notts County. I know they have a system in place there that helps identify their players. So I think it's in place already. Y-Scout already do it. It loosely is lots of independent companies that are helping you to identify your players, but I think it's only going to become more of an influence in the early stages. I still think the human element, the human opinion, the contacts, the additional work that you do to find out about players' character, which you can't stat, are still going to continue to be important. But I think in the early stages of talent ID, it's massive.
See, for you then at the moment, Ross, does a lot of your coverage into a player, or you sort of trying to learn about them, come off the back of statistics, or a statistics second off the back of you being interested in a player? It's
a bit of both, really. I think for me, if I this afternoon I sit down and look for a particular player in a particular position and I don't know, I'll have my resource, I'll have my database, I'll have the players that I've watched, that I know, that I've seen over the years that I like, or that I've just watched, for example. I'll go through all of that first. Then I'll have a look to see, right, these are my top 3 or these are my top 5. Where do they match up statistically? How do they suit? What's he like athletically? All those sorts of things. But if I don't, or if I look at a particular position and I think, I'm not sure about left backs, I would go to the statistical side of it to help my search, to refine my search a little bit. So I think that's how I work at the moment. There'll be clubs out there that straight away go to the stats and say, right, okay, how many crosses is he getting in a game, or what's his pass completion? And just plucking out two parameters statistically, but that's how it would work for me. If I feel like there's a shortcoming or an area where I'm not quite clued up or I'm not quite sure, I'll refer statistically to a different database, if you like. But predominantly, I like to have an idea of what I think or what I like straight away. And by the way, it's not necessarily me signing players that I like. My job's to sign players for the club and the manager that I work for.
I might be tailing off slightly. I've got one more question for you, Ross, but this last little bit is, when players say, "Oh, this club's interested in me," where do you think that information comes from? As a head of recruitment, I can't imagine that you're telling everybody, "Oh, I'm looking at these 4 players, go and tell them." Like if I think that Colchester are interested in signing me, where's that information sort of feed from, and how do people get that perception?
I think it's massive, that one, because we spend a lot of our time trying to keep that confidential. So within our club, there won't be many people that know what our shortlist looks like for January. So when all of a sudden I get a phone call and someone says, "Oh, you're interested in so-and-so at Chelmsford," you go like, "Really? I didn't think we was," but I won't shoot anybody down. I think it can come from a collectively different resource. So people there'll be rumours, there'll be conversations. Someone might overhear something in the training ground of you saying to me, "Oh, what do you think of so-and-so?" And then all of a sudden someone takes it away, and like I said earlier, football's a small world. They start to have those conversations. So I think tittle-tattle and gossip can obviously be a big part of it. There's so many, obviously, agents, but intermediaries and people that are surrounding players and levels of football now that they're constantly looking for an in. So people, I think, will create interest. Sometimes it will match up, sometimes it don't. Sometimes someone sees me at a game and naturally assumes that I'm watching a particular player. So I think that can impact it as well. You said about social media. I think that can really hit home as well. And I think sometimes it's just researching things. So we spoke about a couple of players before the podcast started. Might just been loose conversation of people you've played with. 1 or 2 of them might be people that I'm genuinely interested in signing in January. So I can use that for the good or the bad, can't I? I can tell you I'm really interested in so-and-so and hope that message gets back, or try and keep it a little bit reserved and all of a sudden it leaks and gets out. So I think there's numerous different ways, some that I and we will use to our advantage to get messages out there, and then others that I think is just related to gossip and people trying to create it. And hope sometimes as well, I would say. People would hope that they're going to get an opportunity to move a step up the ladder, so they might hope that I'm at that game to watch that particular player.
Start manifesting it,
Yeah, and sometimes I go to games with no
conception
of who I'm going to watch. So especially away from the transfer windows, I go to a game and it's about me trying to go, right, I haven't seen Leyton Orient play, for example. I need to go and I need to database. I need
Gather
to
an
profile.
opinion,
I need to have an opinion on every single player that's in the Orient team and the Grimsby team, for example. But I might not necessarily be there to watch one particular player, but people
Someone
can
sees
take
you there
that,
and everybody thinks
take
you
that
want
hope
someone.
and that, So, and also as well, I suppose the other side of it is you would look at our club and say, oh, he's got an injury in this area, or they're struggling to keep clean sheets, or they're struggling to score goals, or the goal is injured, whatever it might be, and people put two and two together.
Last one, mate, is what is the best piece of advice you've got for players if they want to achieve a long-lasting career in a game?
Don't know if this is all going to fit together to be like one of those quotes that you can write down, but I'm just trying to think of like real collective things that are important to me. But I think I've seen from players that have really gone on to do well is try to enjoy the experience the best you can. I think I've talked a lot about negatives and things that you've got to try and bounce back from. So I think it's about trying to enjoy the experiences as much as possible. I didn't enjoy being a manager, but I wish now I could look back and think I did this to really enjoy the experience a lot more. So I think it's about trying to hang on to the enjoyment as much as possible, but work as hard as you possibly can to achieve what it is you're going to go on to achieve. Whether it's above, below, hitting a certain level that you're setting out to achieve. Really, really work as hard as you possibly can to not have any regrets. And to be able to have a focus on how and when you do both of those, be really focused on what it is you want to achieve and what it is you want to get better. So probably fits with a lot of the waffly answers I've given you, but yeah, like for me, it's enjoyment, it's focus, and it's really hard work.
Obviously, a lot of the players that I speak to, I ask them, what would you tell a younger version of yourself? And all of them say, I'd like to enjoy it more. You're the first person who said to try and enjoy it more, because it's, even though it's just one word, it's so difficult in the moment to enjoy it, or to think like, oh, I'm having so much fun here, because arguably, and I say this quite a lot, the reason why you're successful in the first place is because you've worked to that point without enjoying it. Yeah. And that's the reason why you've gone on to do good things. So funny that you say try to, because it's very difficult.
Yeah, it is. And the try to thing for me is like, I suffered relegation at Swindon. I really enjoyed being in work every day because the people in our staff were really good people that had a common goal and a common direction as to how we worked, and trying to mimic and copy being what the very, very best tried to do. We didn't do it, and we were probably never going to do it with what we had and the resources we had to work with, but we aspired to be. So I enjoyed some of it, but I didn't enjoy getting relegated. When I won the league at Leyton Orient, I loved so much of winning. I loved so much about the environment and like the social things that come with winning, having a beer on the coach on the way home, or going on nights out as couples and as groups with the euphoria of winning a game, going away from home, all that stuff that comes with being successful. But actually, the games and stuff I didn't really enjoy, because you're just forever tense about trying to win. So I think the word "try to enjoy it" is not always easy to achieve, because it's a difficult lifestyle. It's a difficult world that we've been fortunate enough to work in, but it is also really, really tough to try and enjoy it.
Listen, mate, I think this, from my perspective, has been such a nice conversation, because not only have you got great opinions, which I agree with a lot of, your role as head of recruitment now at Colchester, and obviously your past career as a coach, is going to help a lot of people who are listening to this take a lot of stuff away as to one, how they can become better football players, and two, the process of how they might end up being able to get a move. But I want to say thank you for your honesty, because it's probably not always the thing that people come on and give their honest opinion on football. So thank you for that, mate. Thank you for having me, and I really appreciate your time in sharing all your knowledge with me.
No, thank you. It's been great, and you don't sit down and think and talk about it too often. So no, thanks for allowing me the opportunity.
Cheers, Ross.
Cheers.